Have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible, not because you lacked presence, but because you gave it too freely? People interrupt you, question your worth, dismiss your boundaries, and still you stay composed, hoping your kindness will earn you the respect they withhold. But in a world shaped by strategy, not sincerity, being understood too quickly is not an advantage. It is a vulnerability. You were taught to be open, polite, agreeable, to smile first, to soften your edges. But the truth is, people do not fear what they can predict. They do not respect what they fully grasp. In the eyes of the world, being good is admirable, but being unreadable is powerful. This is not a call to abandon who you are. It is a call to reshape how you move, to trade approval for presence, to replace noise with tension, and to understand what Machiavelli and the Stoics knew well, that the quiet man who cannot be read often becomes the one others watch in silence. If you've ever wondered how to command fear and respect without raising your voice, this might be the shift you've been waiting for. Stay with me, let's walk into that silence together. 1. The silent force that commands the room. Machiavelli did not write to soothe your heart, he wrote to sharpen your discernment. In his world, a prince who is not feared is not safe. But fear, as the Stoics would clarify, must be earned not by brutality, but by restraint. The strongest presence is not the one that shouts, but the one that stays unreadable. Because in a room filled with noise, the one who remains quiet commands attention not for performance, but for caution. They are not waiting for you to speak. They are watching because they do not know what you will do next. That is the essence of influence, when your stillness becomes more potent than their shouting. Look closely at your life. How many times were your words ignored until you withheld them entirely? How many people returned only after your absence spoke louder than your presence ever could? How many boundaries were finally respected only after you enforced them with distance, not discussion? This is not coincidence. It is the result of playing the wrong game. While you were seeking harmony, they were measuring leverage. While you offered explanations, they took notes. While you forgave without hesitation, they tested how much they could take before you would finally walk away. You were sincere, they were strategic. The Stoics would not have been surprised. Marcus Aurelius observed that people act from their own impressions, not your intentions. And Epictetus reminded us that the power we hold lies in our choice of response, not in the behavior of others. Once someone knows you will not raise your tone, will not threaten, will not beg, they assume they can press further without consequence. And once they realize that you will never escalate, they will do it first, because the one who appears harmless becomes the one who is expected to yield. But everything changes the moment your restraint becomes difficult to read. When you stop trying to be understood and start choosing silence over justification, the dynamic shifts. Now they flinch before they speak. They pause before challenging you. They rehearse their tone more carefully. Why? Because suddenly you are not reacting. You are observing. And your lack of reaction forces them to reckon with the unknown. People do not fear noise. They fear potential. They fear what they cannot predict. And when you remain composed, when you withhold your energy, instead of proving your point, you place the burden of interpretation on them. They wonder if your silence means warning, if your pause means decision, if your exit means conclusion. The more they cannot name your state, the more they begin to walk lighter around your presence. This is the quiet dominance of the Stoic path, not through aggression, not through explanation, but through the refusal to be moved by every provocation. When others seek to provoke your emotion, do not offer it. When they expect clarity, offer calm. When they try to define you, leave them with questions. Because the man who needs no defense carries an authority that is not claimed by words, but confirmed by the silence that follows him. 2. The Art of Being Unreadable. To be dangerous is not to be reckless, it is to be unreadable. That is the principle Machiavelli understood better than most. In his view, the moment others can forecast your reactions, they begin to write your story with their pen. They no longer wait for your words. They anticipate them. They no longer respect your stance. They maneuver around it. But if they cannot read you, if they cannot grasp your rhythm, they do not act. They hesitate, they calculate, and in their caution they reveal fear. We have been taught our whole lives to be understood first, to be liked first, to be kind first. But what if the order is reversed? What if being feared quietly and cleanly leads to something deeper than affection, leads to reverence? Not by threat, not by voice, but by silence, by your refusal to bleed on command. Because a man who enters a room with a smile may be welcomed, but the man who enters with no need to speak becomes something else entirely. He becomes presence, and presence does not fade when words end. It lingers in thought. It lives in memory. Machiavelli never relied on force before he had first won with perception. In a world of illusion, the battle is rarely about who you are. It is about what they believe you are capable of. You do not need to be a force of danger. You need only to be perceived as one. And that perception is not created through volume, but through the careful management of visibility, energy, and silence. There is one law in every room. People fear what they do not understand, and they respect what they fear. Step 1. Never reveal your full hand. In a world where the loudest often race to prove themselves, resist the temptation. The boastful expose their ambitions. The reactive expose their triggers. The insecure exposes their need for validation. The more they speak, the more they are mapped. The more they explain, the more they can be replaced. Machiavelli taught opacity, not transparency. He knew the silent man draws more attention than the one begging to be heard. Say little, speak slowly, let your intentions remain undefined. Not to deceive, but to command interpretation. When others must guess where you stand, they tread carefully. When they cannot define you, they obsess over you. In stillness, you become the variable no one can solve. Step 2. Refuse to defend. Refuse to explain. The Stoic sage does not justify his path to every passerby. When criticized, he listens. When misjudged, he observes. But he does not rush to make others comfortable, for nothing disarms your strength faster than explaining yourself to those who seek to provoke. If you explain your silence, you prove it was discomfort. If you defend your choices, you validate their accusations. Machiavelli would nod, perhaps smile faintly, and say nothing more than "noted." And in that restraint, he preserved the one thing people fear more than power: mystery. You cannot be manipulated if you are not emotionally accessible. You cannot be controlled if you do not react as expected. That is how the Stoic wins, by remaining internally undisturbed, regardless of what is thrown at him. Step 3. Be inconsistent with your expression. Do not allow others to predict your warmth. People fear what contradicts itself. Machiavelli knew this. He would praise a man today and replace him tomorrow. He would laugh with you over wine, then disappear without notice. He would offer generosity and, at the same time, never allow that kindness to become routine. Why? Because stability breeds entitlement. But the man who is kind one day and unreadable the next forces others to remain respectful. They do not want to offend the version of you they have not yet met. This is not cruelty, it is strategy. It is the Stoics' version of self-governance, a controlled inconsistency that preserves your sovereignty. A silence that keeps others on edge, never quite sure how far they can reach. Step 4. Remain composed in the presence of chaos. The most unnerving force in a storm is the man who refuses to sway. When others gossip, be still. When they shout, blink slowly. When they panic, breathe deeper. When they insult, let your smile tighten, not in sarcasm, but in quiet power. This does not mean you are unaffected. It means your mind is too trained to be moved by momentary noise. If they cannot shake you, they cannot move you. And if they cannot move you, they begin to fear what you might choose to move next. Stillness is the highest form of intimidation. It is not passive. It is not absence of action. It is the refined Stoic discipline of timing and purpose. Machiavelli would not speak to win arguments. He would speak once, at the end, with precision, because when every word matters, few are needed. And if no one knows what you will say next, they begin adjusting their behavior before you say anything. That is not communication. That is control. When others think of power, they think of dominance. When they think of fear, they think of violence. But Machiavelli saw it differently. He understood that true power does not roar. It resonates. It stays. The most feared men in history were not those who did the most, but those who did least, and were still felt the most. It is not always wise to choose between being feared or being loved, but if forced to choose, choose fear. Not because fear makes you cruel, because fear makes your silence heavy, because fear makes others measure their words twice before speaking. And if they believe you might strike, you never have to. Let us speak plainly now. In the absence of fear, people test you. They overstep. They speak over you. They ask more than they give. They assume you will always be there. Why? Because they do not associate your presence with weight. You are kind, you are predictable, you are safe. And in the world Machiavelli studied, those traits are not virtues, they are invitations. Invitations to be disrespected. So what does a true threat look like in practice? It is not rage. It is not revenge. It is not the need to prove. A threat is quiet. A threat is saying nothing after being dismissed. It is staying calm when rumors rise. It is becoming unreadable when they expect you to react. It is stepping away without needing to be asked. And when you leave, the weight of your absence becomes a message no words could ever deliver. Because when you detach, when you stop chasing, when you no longer fill the space with explanations or emotions, your absence becomes a mirror. People begin to see themselves in it. They ask, why is he silent? What did I do? What changed? And suddenly they realize, without your attention, they no longer know how to measure their worth. They no longer feel certain in their role, and that uncertainty forces reflection. That is not manipulation. That is moral discipline. That is what the Stoics would call living with intentional detachment. You are not withholding to punish. You are withholding because you no longer trade your energy for temporary peace. And when your presence is earned, not given, it becomes invaluable. Machiavelli never needed armies to command fear. He needed silence. He needed distance. He needed to become the unknown. Because when people cannot see your next move, they either retreat or they try to earn your favor again. And both responses serve your rule. So walk as if your absence matters. Withhold as if your energy is precious. Remain unreadable, not to confuse others, but to master yourself. Let people feel your silence more than your words. Let them respect your restraint more than your reaction. Let them remember you not as someone they controlled, but as someone they never quite figured out. That is not just how you earn fear. That is how you earn reverence. That is how you rule quietly. That is how you live like a Stoic in a Machiavellian world. 3. Build the wolf, kill the dog. There is a reason why the call to kill the dog in you strikes a chord so deeply. It is not just a metaphor, it is a reflection of how many people move through the world, loyal even when betrayed, kind even when mocked, obedient even when dismissed. That is the nature of the emotional dog, always seeking approval, always offering softness even when met with indifference. But Machiavelli never praised obedience without discernment. He demanded the wolf. And the wolf, unlike the dog, does not bark. He watches, he waits, and when he moves, no one is ready. To walk this path, you must unlearn the need to explain yourself. You must resist the urge to beg for clarity. The wolf calculates. He withholds. His power lies not in how much he says, but in how much others feel in his silence. There is a reason why the most unforgettable people are often the quietest. Not because they lacked voice, but because they mastered restraint. The irony is striking. Loud people are remembered only while they are loud, but those who remain still linger long after they leave, because the mind cannot stop replaying what it cannot understand. Why didn't he speak? Was he judging us? Was he waiting for something? When there is no closure, the file stays open. And when the mind cannot close the file, it keeps rereading it forever. That is how tension is born, not from action, but from the suggestion of what might be. You do not need to dominate a room with words. Power is not volume. It is presence. It is signaled in posture, in silence, in the refusal to compete for attention. When others seek the stage, the one who does not ask for it becomes the center. Machiavelli would not raise his voice. He would observe. He would let others reveal themselves first. And then, without needing to explain a single thing, he would command the room through the weight of what he withheld. That is how you stop being background and start becoming legend. 4. Daily training for the silent wolf. If you seek to become a presence that commands fear and respect without ever raising your voice, you must begin not with speeches, but with habits. Power is not something you perform, it is something you become through discipline. And discipline begins in the quiet, unnoticed corners of your day. Machiavelli understood this. He did not simply act powerful, he trained for it, daily, silently. The first habit is restraint. Never be the first to react. When someone tries to provoke you, offends you, tests you, they are not seeking clarity. They are testing your stillness. Most rush to defend themselves, to prove their dignity, to get the last word. But the one who waits, who allows the dust to settle before he moves, becomes the one whose next action everyone fears. A true Stoic does not respond out of impulse. He pauses, he chooses, because he knows that the first to speak is often the weakest. And the one who holds the pause forces others to wrestle with their own discomfort. The pause is not uncertainty, it is calculation, and nothing unsettles the ambitious more than being studied. The second habit is austerity in speech. Speak slowly, say less. Leave before the moment needs you to. Most people fill the air with words so they can be understood, but the man who does not need to be understood forces others to interpret him, and interpretation carries weight. When you speak deliberately and briefly, people begin to wonder, was that agreement or a warning? Why did he leave before the room settled? Why didn't he smile back? In that wondering, you live longer in their thoughts. Machiavelli never allowed himself to be fully known. He did not seek connection. He cultivated tension, and that tension made him unforgettable. The third habit is absence as presence. You must withdraw in order to reinforce your impact. The man who is always available becomes furniture. The man who appears and disappears with purpose becomes a force. You must leave the conversation while they still want more. You must exit the meeting while your words still echo. Do not let your presence become expected. Let it become remembered. A dog is always there, loyal and accessible. But a wolf vanishes, and in vanishing, commands curiosity. This is how you teach others to feel your absence more than your presence. The fourth habit is firmness without explanation. When you say no, do not explain. When you change direction, do not defend. When you walk away, do not leave the door half open. The need to justify is the first sign of lost power. Machiavelli knew this. Every explanation you offer is an invitation for someone to argue with you, but a man who simply acts without apology, without emotional wrapping, becomes unshakable. The moment you begin to defend, you stop leading. You begin to negotiate, and a true threat does not negotiate. He decides. The final habit is emotional neutrality. Not apathy, but the discipline of inner calm in the face of social testing. You will be poked, you will be challenged. They will attempt to get a rise out of you with humor, flirtation, disrespect, even false praise. But when you remain unmoved, not cold but unreadable, you force them into a position of assumption. And in that assumption, they reveal more about themselves than they discover about you. The unreadable man becomes the mirror that others fear to face. Smile slightly. Observe without response. Step back rather than step in, because the more they try to decipher you, the more their own certainties collapse. Machiavelli trained this like a warrior trains the blade. Through posture, through silence, through ritual. His presence whispered one unshakable truth. You do not know what I am capable of, and you never will. But if you cross me, you might find out. That is not a threat. That is a promise written in restraint. If you wish to walk the world without shouting yet still be heard, begin with your habits. Become difficult to read, slow to react, sparse with words, strategic with appearances, firm without justification, and calm in all things, not because you lack feeling, but because you command yourself first. That is the Stoic path to influence, not by claiming power, but by becoming the kind of man who no longer needs to. 5. Silent mastery of presence. There is a narrow edge between being a mystery and being dismissed, between the kind of silence that commands the room and the kind that disappears into it. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. His brilliance was not in choosing fear over respect, but in knowing how to blend both so precisely that when he said nothing, his name still lingered in the minds of those present. Fear without respect provokes resistance. People may comply with your presence, but underneath they begin to plot your absence. They obey out of pressure, not out of recognition. And that kind of power, though loud, is temporary. On the other hand, respect without fear breeds comfort. People trust you, they praise your skill, but eventually they assume too much. They talk over you, they stop watching what they say. And once they stop watching, they start underestimating. The answer is tension. Not tension born of chaos or conflict, but the kind that hangs in the air when someone is deeply composed, yet unreadable. You are kind, but not soft. Calm, but never passive. You are not there to entertain. You are there to be remembered. The Stoic cultivates this through consistency in principle and restraint in emotion. You do not need to be warm to be wise. You do not need to explain to be understood. Offer clarity in one moment, then vanish. End the argument with a single phrase, then step out of reach. Let others dwell on your absence. Let them feel the cost of not having you near. That is how your silence gains weight. Not because you withheld out of spite, but because you never offered without purpose. Machiavelli never begged to be seen. He never warned when he would leave. He trained people to feel the shift when he withdrew. Praise was met with a nod. Presence was given sparingly. And when he left, the room felt colder. That is how you rule, not by declaring dominance, but by mastering absence, the kind that lingers like the loss of something priceless, the kind that leaves others walking lighter, simply because they remember how heavy your silence once was. 6. Create obsession through distance. What truly captivates the mind is not what is always present, but what is briefly near and then gone. Obsession is not born from availability. It grows in the space between contact and completion. People do not dwell on what they fully possess. They become consumed by what once felt within reach, but remained untouchable. That is how you become unforgettable, by offering just enough to stir the waters and then stepping back into stillness. You make eye contact once. You speak one sentence that cuts deeper than it should. You hold a posture that unsettles the chaotic. Then, without a word, you disappear. And in that absence, you leave them circling back, not because you asked them to, but because they never found closure. The door was left slightly ajar. The conversation never truly ended. And so, they return again and again to finish what was never meant to be finished. The first strategy is restraint through unpredictability. While others rush to reveal themselves, you offer very little. You speak slowly, you smile less, you give only what is essential. This contrast forces people to recalibrate. They lower their voice, they measure their words. They begin responding not to your commands, but to your gravity. They feel it, and they adjust. The second strategy is projection. People will assign you labels: intense, cold, mysterious. Let them. Once they begin imagining who you are, they begin investing in that image. They examine your silences. They fill the gaps with stories, and now their assumptions have become your echo. Do not correct them. Their own invention becomes their obsession. The third strategy is to exit just before they are ready. You end the dialogue one breath too soon. You walk away while they are still composing their response. You let your silence stretch 1 second longer than comfort allows. That incompletion becomes a loop they cannot resolve. And in that loop, your presence deepens. But the final and most essential strategy is sovereignty of the inner world. When they ask what drives you, offer precision wrapped in mystery. When they ask what you want, respond with clarity veiled in calm. You are not hiding, you are guarding. Because the moment others can map your inner world, they begin to scheme around it. But when your motives are not offered, they stop trying to manage you and begin to respect your depth. This is where tactics become transformation. Silence is no longer a method. It becomes your nature. You are not withholding to provoke. You are silent because you have mastered what matters. Machiavelli's power was not in his threats. It was in the uncertainty he left behind. His final form was not rage, it was discipline, not to be feared for his actions, but for his potential. The true Stoic ruler is not obeyed because he commands. He is obeyed because others walk differently in his presence, just in case he is watching. And when they finally realize they can't define you, they stop trying to control you. They step back, they tread lighter, because what they can't predict, they begin to respect. Comment silent strength. Subscribe if this spoke to you, and prepare for what comes next.